Contador, Valverde, Purito Rodríguez, Chris Froome, 7 mountain finishes. Ancares, Lagos de Covadonga, Cuitu Negro. Emotion, passion, suffering, glory. Possibly the best Vuelta in history. Do you want to know what happened during the 2012 Vuelta a España? Follow my wheel and I'll tell you. The 2012 edition is considered by almost all experts as the best Vuelta a España in history. The reason? As we'll analyze now, a series of factors converged in a historic show, both on the road with a hellish fight between the best riders of the moment, and off it with overflowing expectation. Before the start, the route was harshly criticized by the specialized media for the abuse of stages with a single climb with a high finish, the few kilometers against the clock, and for most of the stages having similar characteristics. A climb in the final kilometers with impossible percentages, which promised spectacle, but which forgot the rest of the stage to the detriment of the escapes and brave riders. This Vuelta gave us a hand-to-hand fight between the big favorites in many stages, something attractive for the average fan. Despite the repetitive outcome, the general passion that floated in that Vuelta during the end of the summer of 2012 was rarely seen. The best of that edition was the conjunction of the 3 great Spanish cyclists of this century, all 3 in exceptional form, in the case of Contador, perhaps not in his prime, and all 3 in the grand tour of his country. 3 different ways of understanding cycling for riders with a long career behind them. Alberto Contador, a newcomer after his sanction in the Tour 2010, always with his aggressive character in the mountains and connecting with the public in an almost irrational way, was the great favorite. Alejandro Valverde, also after a sanction, returned to the Grand Tours after a tour made up by a stage victory and going in tow much of the race but never losing the wake of the best. Purito Rodríguez was, however, in the best moment of his career with 2 years already in the Katyusha team, exercising the captaincy that he was denied in Movistar. They were joined by Chris Froome, who weeks before was in his prime, waiting for Wiggins on the ramps of the Tour, but who in the Vuelta was unable to maintain that state of form until the end. The race had many episodes, almost as many as high finishes, and almost all with similar finish. High pace of Saxo, attacks of Contador near the finish line, Purito drying them and replicating them to end up winning the stage. The Catalan rider won several stages, even dressed in red, making in Galicia a time trial so honorable that he was about to win the race until very close to the end. An end worthy of the best cycling feats in history. The 2012 Vuelta a España started with a 16-kilometer team time trial through the streets of Pamplona. The Movistar team won the stage, and the Spanish rider, Jonathan Castroviejo, the first red jersey. The battle between the favorites began in the 3rd stage, ending in the demanding climb to Arrate. The first to try was Valverde, and at that moment, the madness was unleashed, with countless attacks, especially from Alberto Contador. The 4 favorites arrived together at the finish, where Valverde won the sprint, taking advantage perhaps of the relaxation of Purito, who had his first victory in hand. The Vuelta was starting, and all the cards were already on the table. The next day, in the final stage in Valdercaray, Contador and Froome tried from afar, but they were perfectly controlled by the Katyusha team, very attentive throughout the day. Valverde, who was cut, lost some time and entered 50 seconds behind the group of Purito, who managed to wear red, with the whole Vuelta still ahead. Froome and Contador were not far behind the Catalan, at 1 and 5 seconds respectively. Only 2 days passed until the next battle, on the way to Jaca, ending in Fuerte del Rapitan, where Purito, withstanding the attempts of both the Saxo team and Froome's team, managed to overtake his rivals in an anthological sprint on the last ramp, getting a small advantage of seconds and showing that, at that moment, Joaquim Rodriguez was the fittest rider. The 8th stage, on the way to La Collada de la Gallina in Andorra, gave us another ode to attack cycling. After the control of the Sky team to keep the breakaway close, the final climb was a continuous attempt by all the favorites. First, it was the Brit, who with his attack put the leader in difficulties. Purito managed to recover and even tried. Contador seemed the strongest that day with the demaraje within the last kilometer, but he had to see how, in the last 500 meters, the Murcian Valverde, with Purito to wheel, overtook him like a bullet to take his second stage win with a masterful display of power. The Vuelta was proving incredibly exciting, and everything was yet to come. Even on the Barcelona stage, Joaquim Rodriguez got some unexpected seconds by surprising his rivals on the ascent to Montjuic, escaping with the Belgian Gilbert, who got the victory. A few seconds that meant gold for the Catalan, since although he seemed the strongest, the distances weren't many with respect to his opponents. 53 seconds with Froome, 1 minute with Alberto Contador, and 10 seconds more with Valverde. The overall dynamic would not change over the next few days. The opponents tried, but Joaquim Rodriguez showed himself as a solid leader and superior to his rivals. He defended heroically in the 40-kilometer time trial in Pontevedra, losing only 50 seconds to Contador, and was able to win 2 more stages. First in the Mirador de Ézaro, a wall of 3 kilometers with ramps of 22 and 23% where, after a fierce fight, he was able to overcome Contador in the last meters. The other was in Ancares, 2 days later, a very hard climb of 10 kilometers, the end of the 14th stage, where equality was, again, the dynamic. Purito prevailed himself in the last meters to Alberto Contador, who was not having the necessary strength to release the Catalan. A setting that would be repeated the next day on the way to Lagos de Covadonga, without differences between the favorites and with victory for the Spanish of the Caja Rural team, Antonio Piedra, and in the ascent to Pajares to Cuitu Negro, with possible ramps which, more than giving spectacle, put the cyclists in great trouble to climb. After the toughest stages, the Vuelta seemed to be leaning towards the side of Purito Rodríguez, but Contador, the one who never gives up, was 28 seconds behind in the general classification. Everyone knows Alberto's character, but honestly, there was no ground. But cycling in general, and Contador in particular, are uncontrollable phenomena, and the great revolution of the 2012 Vuelta a España was formed as the title of the series, The Least Expected Day. It was stage number 17 between Santander and Fuente de, a mid-mountain stage with a 3rd category pass and 2 second category, the Collada de la Hoz and Fuente de, the end of the stage. And this was where Contador, whose motto is walk or bust, turned the 2012 Vuelta a España upside down. 3 of Saxo's companions were placed on the day's escape, indicating that something was about to happen, and it happened. At 50 kilometers from the finish line during the ascent to the Collada de la Hoz, Contador launched a desperate attack that surprised his rivals when they were unprepared, contacted the front group, and thus pressuring his direct opponents. Behind, Purito was left without companions and began to see how the distance grew. In the town of Potes, before the last ascent, the distance was close to 1 minute. The Saxo rider, with the help of his former teammate Tiralongo, was breaking the race. The Catalan rider was suffering too much and couldn't even follow Valverde's wheel in an agonizing ascent in which he was burying all his chances of victory. The Pinto rider, in a demonstration of race, courage, and nonconformity, won the stage and managed brilliantly to wear the red jersey as leader of the Vuelta a España. A disconsolate Purito would enter the finish line more than 3 minutes behind the brand new winner, and Alberto Contador, who, in this way, managed to win the Vuelta a España 2012 after a battle that was as intense as it was exciting, possibly the best edition in the history of the Spanish race. If you liked the video, subscribe and like it. You can collaborate with us with a super thanks. And if you want to continue enjoying the best stories of the Vuelta a España, don't miss this.